There are 5 primary reasons that I think it's incredibly difficult for parents to recognize and explain PDA. So the first one is because PDA is part of the autism spectrum. However, the majority of these kids are pretty socially adept and had no trouble making eye contact unless dysregulated or in meltdown, often have friends, and didn't have delayed verbal development. So initially people are like, well, they can't be autistic. Okay, that's the first reason. The second reason is these children are often very high masking, meaning they have 2 very different versions of themselves depending on the perception, their brain's perception of safety. So the places where they don't feel safe or perceive that they're safe, even on a subconscious level, are the places where they're going to paradoxically behave the best, right? So at school, they might be like completely fine and compliant, and then at home, they're extremely defiant, oppositional, explosive, violent. Okay? The third reason is because it is a fluctuating disability, and the reason for this is that every time their nervous system activates with the perception of threat, it builds stress in the system. And a lot of this is going on internally, and you might not see it until that explosion, right? So sometimes the same trigger can pass by with no meltdown or explosion, and the next day it might result in a huge meltdown. And this is really confusing for parents. The fourth reason is because there are different expressions of PDA, right? We often think about extroverted, explosive, socially oriented kids, but there's also the internalized expression of PDA, which might be more introverted and more freeze-fawn expression of the nervous system. And then finally, what's important to recognize, especially if you're a practitioner or a therapist listening to this, is that for many PDA kids, it impacts access to one basic need, but that basic need might not look the same as another PDA kid, right? So my child has trouble accessing eating as his basic need. Other children have no trouble eating, but they might have a toileting regression where they need to use diapers at the age of 8. Or they might go into a non-24-hour sleep cycle, right? So from the outside, you're seeing these 2 very different looking children, but internally the nervous system mechanism is exactly the same.